Hello, this is Peter Combs, and we are dealers in Chinese and Asian works of art, and we've put together this video with the hopes of helping some of you out there who are interested in Chinese porcelain and pottery to be better able to determine authentic pieces from reproductions. So what we've done is we've gathered up a couple of hundred photographs of things we've sold over the years, bought and sold, and fortunately we save images of everything, so we have the feet and whatnot. So let's begin. The first piece is this very nice, probably Sung Dynasty Jun glazed blue vase with a little crackle pattern, pear shaped. There's another example is in the background that's lobed. A number of these came from the Cornell University collection years ago. We bought them all. Here's a shot of the foot. Very typical of these. This nice buff-colored, tan-colored foot, recessed, glazed, and a nice little crackle in there. Then we have this, another Sung hairs for a bowl, very typical, black glaze with the brown, with the iron glaze. And here's a view of the foot. It's about what you always expect to see, that nice cocoa chocolate brown. The foot is shaped around the outside. And then Liao amber glaze cup. You see the drip on the rim. These are fired upside down, so the glaze runs down towards the mouth. Here's a nice view of the foot of one of these. Buff colored. If it was clean, it would be a lot whiter. But that's what they look like, and how the glaze is thin and then thickens as it runs towards the rim. Here's another Sung piece. Very attractive Qingbai cup with a wonderfully shaped foot. Also fired upside down. Why the rim is bare. And here's a shot of the underside, and how they trim that foot slightly outward, and you can see the details. Here is a Sung Qingbai, they call them spittoons or jidaos. These are fairly small. This is a very sort of provincial one, but it's nicely done. And here's a view of the foot of this. It's slightly recessed, unglazed with bits from the kiln on it, firing things. And a Sung Yixing, or Qingbai rather, Mei Ping vase, carved, lotus blossoms and leaves. Here's a view of the base. Again, very similar to the previous examples. And here you have a Sung black glazed pear-shaped vase with a flared rim, and glazed only partially down the body, and then it leaves behind this very nicely done buff-colored body. You can see the turnings, very good color, recessed. You can see lots of details in it. That's what you want to see in these. And here is a probably Sung, maybe a little later. This was a large crackled Celadon bowl we had. Love the crackle on that. Here's the foot. Again, brown, very much like the hairs for a bowl, and lots of details. You can see some iron pushing through the glaze on the bottom. And here is a nice, most likely Yuan period, a little jarlet with acanthus leaves around the foot, thickly glazed. And the base is sort of a buff pink color, unglazed, very slightly recessed, and the potter had scratched something into it. I don't know what that was about, but that's what they look like. And here we have a 15th century carved and glazed Celadon pear-shaped vase with acanthus leaves and lotus blossoms on it. Lovely little vase. And here's a view of the bottom. Typically these Ming Celadons have these brownish feet with a slightly conical shape in the bottom there. You can see that. And here's another. This is an incense burner, also from about the 15th century, carved deeply, nicely glazed. Here's a shot of the foot, again with that red toning, and an old Chate Gallery label in New York on it. We've had this some time ago. It's a lovely example. Again, a very thick glaze. And this is another, probably Yuan to Ming Celadon stem cup with a squared brown foot with a dressing on it. Here's a better shot of the foot. It's recessed underneath, deeply recessed and fully glazed. Nicely done little cup. Not terribly expensive. So you can find them out there. And here is a very good large carved and thickly glazed Ming Celadon Lotus form charger. Here's the base of it. It's again, it's got that iron red area in the middle where it sat on something while it was being fired. Notice the foot is glazed because it wasn't touching the bottom of the kiln. Next up is this very nice Ming Celadon incense burner. It's a large one. Here's an interior view, again, where it was unglazed. You got a little iron pulling through there, lots of crackle. And here's the base. You can see where it was clearly fired on a stand and the feet are glazed. Here is a very lovely little Ming Celadon vase with cross-hatching on it. And here is an image of the foot. Again, recessed. You can see the nice clear turnings. And again, that outer edge of the foot, V-shaped, neatly trimmed away. A little glaze under there. This was a wonderful thing we had not long ago. This Ming Dynasty Marken period Zhengde bowl. It was made between probably 1506 and 1521. There's an image of the base, the mark. Beautiful piece, came out of a collection we handled. And here's a detail of the foot, a little of the rain mark rather, a little closer up. Nice typical 4-character mark on these big lotus form bowls. There's a view of the foot rim. Very neatly done. Next is this Jiajing Marken period jarlet, neatly painted. Also Ming Dynasty, with birds, peacocks all over it, and lappets around the neck and around the base. And beautiful white porcelain on this. This was a lovely example. And here's a view of the foot with the rain mark, the Jiajing rain mark, and notice the foot rim, the way the foot is trimmed, buff colored. Here's a side shot of the foot. You have that little bit of iron showing through, and quite typical of these. This is a particularly good example. It's a very nice little example, and again you have that iron red edge on the foot. This was a large blue and white Ming jar we had a while ago with a lid, beautifully painted, very exuberant, bold strokes. And a quick note on these lids: often you'll find jars and the lids will sort of be loosely fitting. And that's because the lids were often made in a separate factory and brought over in piles and sort of matched up as the jars were done. This is the foot of one of these pieces, late 16th century, unglazed, has sort of a rolled foot to it. And we have this. This is a terrific little Ming Dynasty jar, about 8 or 9 inches tall. And the glaze on this is very glossy, and the cobalt is applied on these with a straw. They blow it on, and it gives that lovely surface effect. Very unusual. And here's a foot of the base of it. Has a white glazed bottom, nicely done foot. Very neat stopping of the glaze just at the foot, and the foot is well shaped and carved. It's a very good example. Here's a detail of it. You can see the knife cut, that angled sort of facet running around the shoulder of the foot rim there, caused by the knife. Very well done. Next we have this huge, this was a 23-inch bowl or platter done during the transitional period with an Anwa decorated white glazed rim. The interior painted with excellent deep cobalt blue, drawn, outlined, and then washed in with flowers and rocky outcroppings. It's a particularly nice example. Here's a picture of the foot, the bottom of this. A nicely shaped foot with some kiln grit. The center swirled on there with some white glaze, and the rest of the body is a slightly bluish tinge. Here's a view across the bottom of the foot. How these early plates look. This plate was probably made between, 1630 and 1650. Here's a fairly well-known type of Jiajing blue and white bowl with those ruyi head center circle going around the flowers. And here is the bottom of that piece. Very typical Jiajing bottom, that mark, and a nice floral sprays decorating the outside. And here we have a mid-late Ming Dynasty jar, around 6 inches tall, with a Liuhan sitting there with his incense burner and an attendant beneath a pine tree. And here is what the bottom of these look like. Ming feet come in a wide variety, but there's a certain feel to them that you'll get over time. This is the foot, neatly cut and trimmed. Here's a side view of it with a little kiln grit there, a little bit of misfire on the glaze. Not unusual. This is a very large Kuan, it's 16th century jar. That I actually bought this in Nantucket. Somebody had made a lamp out of it. I de-lamped it immediately many years ago. Here's a detail of the brushwork. The decoration on this is really quite excellent. And this is a big jar. This is a nice sized jar. 18 or so inches tall. Here's a picture of the bottom, and there's the hole from when they lamped it. But it's still a good example, a beautifully done bottom. Nice iron oxide line running there along the edge of the glaze and the foot. And very typical of these. And let's see, so this is a fairly well-known type of Ming jar. These were rather provincial, slightly lobed, and often had persimmons or other types of fruit on them. Sometimes they used squirrels to decorate them. And here's the bottom of this. On the more provincial pieces, they're sort of roughly cut and trimmed this way. You can see how it's done. And here's a little more refined piece. It may be slightly older than the last, done sort of in the manner of the Yuan Dynasty jars, with the ruyi head band around the collar and those Lotus scrolls. Here's the bottom, very neatly trimmed, nice, almost flat white paste showing there, and again that little red iron line. This is a jar that belonged to a friend of mine that he was selling, and I helped him take the pictures. The beautiful Ming jar, wonderful glossy glaze, nice landscape setting. Notice the shaped foot and neck, and again one of those lids that was put on probably a little later. The bottom on this one is a bit unusual on these jars, but maybe it's due to the shaping of the foot. You can see the chatter marks. The foot was quite tall on this one, and then the interior is scooped out. Here's a Jiajing jar, and done in aubergine and greens, and inscribed neck, unglazed biscuit elephant head handles. Quite unique on these, and has a ground down neck. You can see where the mouth was cut down. It's probably missing an inch or two in height. Here's a view of the foot. Yes, this one was lamped too many years ago. There was a shortage of lamps in the 20s, so they used to use Ming jars as lamps and vases. Notice the trimming of the foot. There's another view of it there. You can see where the potter actually cut away excess clay. Nice white paste though, and some residue of an old inscription on the bottom. Now we have this molded late Ming, sort of a Zizhao crackle glazed Kuan Yin figure. Nicely done, provincial piece. When you look inside these, like this one, you can sometimes see the fingerprints of the potter when he was pressing it up into the mold. Pretty typical, and they went way up. And here's another, actually from the same collection as the previous. This is a bit more fine in characteristics, has an applied porcelain hand, which is interesting. This is a Zizhao Ming Kuan Yin. And there's a view of the decoration. That marbleized effect was something they were quite good at in the Ming Dynasty, and they didn't do it a lot, so you want to look for it. If you see it, if you see one of these, buy it. They're worth having. They're quite unusual. Here's a picture of the bottom of it. Flat, fairly smooth. There's a hole in the center for venting, and the old collector's tag there. Nice example. And this is a Zizhao jar, densely glazed, crackled, with a phoenix flying among the clouds. This came from the Joseph Lyndon Smith collection in New Hampshire many years ago. And there it is, there's the foot. You can see there was some sort of firing ring under the base, and that's very erratically trimmed foot rim, quite dirty and brown, typical of these, and it's a nice example. This is a Zizhao Kuan Yin sitting on a rocky plinth with a fu line looking over her, well, as you face it, on her left side. And here's a picture of the bottom. This is a provincial piece. It's pretty rustic, actually, but it's a good collectible example done during the early 1600s. There it is. This jar, we're getting a little on now. We're heading into the late Ming, early Qing dynasty. This Mei Ping vase. There's a virtual mate to it at the Fair Sackler Gallery. This one came out of the Coolidge collection up here in the Boston area. Here's the foot on this. Very dense glaze, as you can see, with a flat foot. Neatly stops just above it. Very nice piece. Next, this Swato, big Swato plate. This was over 20 inches in diameter. It's got a bridge in the center with a mountain landscape like a Chinese painting and all kinds of border decorations. Here's a picture of the bottom. Swato dishes typically are pretty rough, and this one is no exception. The glaze wasn't put on particularly neatly. The bottom bulges a little. Here's a transitional piece. It's a transitional blue and white jar made between 1640 and 1660 with these nice little clusters of flowers. These are quite nice, very collectible, with a slightly concave base. You can see turnings on there. And note, the paste is now quite white. Nice white paste on there. Not much discoloration. And here's another example of a transitional piece. Wonderful little bowl with liuhans on it underneath a leafless tree and a landscape setting. Nice shape. Notice the foot. There's a detail of the figures. Nice facial expressions. I always like the facial expressions they used on these. Very attractive. Here's the foot on this. Unlike the previous one, which was flat and concave, this one stands up quite a bit to go in a stand, and has a nice squared off shoulder to the foot rim, and the interior is neatly glazed. Here are a pair of transitional sleeve vases, very typical with the cafe au lait browned rims and little flowers and landscapes. Here's a picture of the bottom. This is what they nearly always look like, one or the other. Swirled, flat, slightly flaring up to the glaze. And they clean up pretty well if you want to clean them. This is also a transitional jar. Incredibly deep cobalt blue, heading towards the Kangxi era, with a pine tree there. Lavish use of cobalt on this. It was like sapphires. And here is the you get the introduction of these birds, these stylized angulated birds with bamboo on one side and pine trees on the other. They continued doing these right into the Kangxi period with enamels. Here's a view of the mouth of that jar. Very dense, very hard white porcelain, that slight iron oxide line there. You can see turnings. And here's a view of the foot. We're back to those slightly concave feet. There's a little gap there in the paste caused during the firing. You can see where they scraped away excess clay. This is a pair of wonderful, near pair of transitional jars. They didn't make these in pairs, really, pear-shaped vases. We do not have pictures of the bottoms of these, but the bottoms are consistent with the footed piece you just saw 2 pieces back. Fairly well cut, neat, and recessed glazed bottom. Here is a wukai, underglaze blue with there's the squirrel I mentioned before, appears sometimes in the center on a grapevine. And again, here's the bottom, conical, turned, slightly concave rather, neatly finished foot, typical. Here is another transitional jar with these big palm frond trees on it. Beautiful white glaze. The glaze on this one was very white, along with a very, very white paste. And here's the foot. Again, like the sleeve vases, turned, pretty flat, slightly flaring out towards the up to the glaze. And now, this. This was either transitional or Ming. Everybody went back and forth. It could be Kangxi, with 3 of these fu lines spaced evenly around it. What made me think it might be Ming is the color of the paste on the end of those little feet. Looks more Ming than it looks like Qing or transitional to me, but it's somewhere in the 16th century, 1600s. And then you have this, a very lovely transitional jar, possibly Kangxi, with the underglaze blue, overglaze enamels, fruit elegantly, neatly painted. This came from the Green collection in Rhode Island a few years ago. Nice little wukai jar. Here is the close-up of the mouth. You can see the paste and the way the potter kept the glaze back. And nice deep colors on this. Beautiful deep colors. Here's a view of the interior. Note the very evident turnings and the bluish tinge to the glaze. That is the color. And there's the foot again, slightly concave, very flat and smooth, with a splash of clear glaze, white glaze in the center. They turn up sometimes. And now you have a nice 18th century ink slab, cobalt blue decoration. It could be Kangxi, it could be Qinlong. There's the overview of it. And they coated it with this this sort of resin coating that they put on these when they fired them to keep the ink and things from soaking into the biscuit. Here's a view of the bottom. And you have that nice rounded foot. These are very heavy for their size. Usually about 4 or 5 inches wide. And they often, not often, but sometimes they come with a cover. Here is a transitional period, blue and white, nicely done, deep cobalt blue plate. Transitional period. Sometimes they call these tianqi wares, Japanese market. There's a view of the foot, a sort of a rustically done foot with a Ming mark. It's not the correct mark, but they used to use them all the time. Here's a detail of the foot. You can see little bits of odds and ends of imperfections in the paste, which wasn't unusual on these at all. And now we're onto this little Sankai glazed, incise decorated Kangxi Bowl. Aubergine, yellow and white, cut in there. And very typical of these. There's a view of the bottom. Then you drop in this little square seal. Note the color of the foot on this, changing a little, sort of a yellowish skin tone on some of these narrower foot pieces. And here's another Sankai example, often called Spinach and Egg Bowls. And these were done in fairly large quantities, very thinly potted typically. And again, you see a little rounded base there with that seal mark dropped in once again. And again, the very narrow foot. Very typical. And here you have, this is a nice Wukai, sort of semi-vert Kangxi charger. It's very worn enamels, not unusual. Often they very much are on these. Here's a view of the bottom. That's a classic foot on these big bowls with that double track, that tracked rim unglazed underneath with some sort of scholar's or Buddhist symbol. And this is a very fine, very large Kangxi basin with Buddhist symbols and precious objects all over it, done in a nice deep cobalt blue. The clay is very white, the glaze is very white, and lavish use of cobalt on this. Nicely done. And when you flip it over, you see the foot again, very similar to the feet you would see on some of those transitional pieces a while ago. They still made them this way, but the paste is a good bit whiter and denser. And here's a little cup done in the similar form, but this was only probably 4 inches wide. Again, deep cobalt blue with these ruyi heads and flowers. Here's a view of the bottom. They had put a faux Jiajing mark on it. Unglazed bottom with black ink. Rather interesting. And next up is this. It's elegantly done Kangxi charger with citron fingers on the right and pomegranates and persimmons. And this bowl had a rough life, evidently, by that zippered up back with all those staples that were put in it. Someone loved it. And you can see some kiln grit on the base there. Here's a view of the foot with the kiln grit. Very typical foot with a slightly yellowish edge to it and white, nicely shaped with a knife. They cut it right down and make it as tidy as they could. Here's a view of the interior of that foot, again with kiln grit impregnated in the paste, but the paste itself is quite white and very refined, something you always look for. This was an excellent Kangxi bowl, very well done, deep cobalt blue, neatly painted from a collection in England. Here's the base with a faux Ming mark on it, but the foot in the interior is neatly glazed, very nicely done. Here's a detail of the foot. There's a few little bits of imperfections in there from its firing that got stuck on the clay, on the paste, but nice white foot. Here's another Kangxi Bowl, not quite as refined as the previous, but a lovely example with root heads and calligraphy or a script on it, and these lotus blossoms. Here's a view of the inside, again with some sort of inscription. We never bothered looking that up. Nicely trimmed white foot. Look at the paste of that foot. You'll see that color. This color is very consistent in Kangxi pieces, and is a great aid in trying to identify them. You really want to see this color when you're looking at them. This is one of the nicest Kangxi bowls we ever had, with the warrior and the lady on the deer. The silver rim was put on it. It's a large bowl. It was almost 9 inches wide. And there's a foot, nice, strong, thick foot on this. Again, slightly yellow in tone, but very white where it's been, rubbed around on a few tabletops over its 250-year life. There it is. Neatly done. You can see a couple of turnings on there. You can see the cut marks from the potter. He trimmed that foot. And here you have a double spout, ribbed, swirled Kangxi vase or goblet. And bands of flowering vines. The bottom of it was cut flat and fairly deeply recessed like a flower, and glazed with an artisanal leaf on the inside. There's a side view of the foot. You get a good look at it. There's some kiln grit there, and you can see little cut marks from the potter on there, which is pretty typical. That's what you come across. And here you have a Kangxi goblet with a cover. There's a little chip in the cover's finial there. Notice again the cover is a little different color. And there you have the foot on this with a deeply recessed glazed base with a little firing gap or glaze gap underneath, but again a white foot. There you have a Kangxi famille vert, molded teapot with precious objects and scholars' objects, jade books, so forth. And there's the foot, and the feet were applied on and done in sort of these demi-lune shapes to conform with the upper part of the pot. Slight gaps in the paste. Here's a close-up, that nice translucent green and yellow and aubergine, and that opaque iron red that they often used applied to it. Sometimes they just splashed it on. They weren't very tidy with it. Here's a pair of garlic neck Kangxi vases. And the decoration on these are like dowdy masks that you would see on ancient bronzes, with slightly flared foot, neatly done. The feet on these were pretty dirty, and I never cleaned them. But if you cleaned them, they'd be quite white. This dirt was probably caused by being in a stand for quite a while. But again, notice how neatly done it ends, the glaze at the foot, and that very nice white paste, and neatly painted, neatly enameled. Here you have a shaped rim Kangxi bowl, molded with these lappets of sort of lotus leaves or something filled in for decoration. There's the foot on it, very delicately done. The glaze gets right up to the very edge of the foot and just ends. And again, a white paste. Here's another plate from about the same period, sort of molded, shaped rim with crabs and fish on it. It's charming type, and you do see them occasionally. And there is another bottom there's a bottom of that plate again with the artisanal leaf, neatly finished, glossy glaze, nicely done bottom. And another Kangxi plate. This is a famous pattern with these radiating lotus leaf borders filled with flowers in the basket in the center. Very tightly drawn. There's a detail of it. Very precise drawing in the flower basket. A couple of imperfections there in the glaze. You can see the little bits got in there while it was being made. And there's a picture of the back of it with floral sprigs and a Buddhist object in the center. And again, a neatly done white foot. There it is. And it's slightly V-shaped. But you see on later Kangxi and into the Yongchen period, you see these V-shaped feet become more and more obvious. And here you have another sort of mid-late Kangxi bowl with these flowers on them, a scrolling interior decoration. And there's a view of the bottom of it. You have the Buddhist symbols, Buddhist symbol on the base, and a nice white, again, cut foot. Here's a Kangxi bowl, with a very artistically done border filled with cranes around, flying around, circling clouds. Good deep cobalt. And it does have a Kangxi mark on it. Oddly, there's a misfiring gap right over one of the characters, but it is a Marken period bowl with a nicely done foot. And this one, we're going to jump ahead a little. This is probably a Yongxin period enameled, overglaze enamel blue, and overglaze other enamels plate. Beautiful quality. This was a big plate. This is about 15 inches wide. Very nicely done back. And again, the foot very V-shaped. There's a look at it. It's been trimmed up to a little bit of a point there. And good even glaze. They have minor imperfections at times, you can see on the left. Pretty typical. And here's a Kangxi underglaze blue, Chinese, they call these Chinese amari. It's underglaze blue with iron red and femi-vert decoration on it. There's a picture of the back. Nice white paste. Very attractive border rim they put on that with these peony or apple blossom trees. And here you have a rather good, again, one of these Sankai glazed bowls. The Kangxi, again, that funny little square. And note the shaped foot. That foot should be getting drilled into your head by now. That's what you want to see. And this is a Kangxi Liuhan statue, porcelain statue. He's carrying a scroll. Love the facial expression on him. And here's a picture of the bottom of this. Not nearly as neat and tidy as the rest of them, but that's how they often did these statues. It's got an old Ralph Chait label on it. They were a good dealer. They're still around. And here's another piece from this same collection of a ho-ho boy, they call him, seated on a plinth, wearing his little Lotus vest. Great facial expression on him. This was a large statue. This was almost 10 inches tall, 11 inches tall. And note the eyes, the nostrils, the teeth. Everything is very finely detailed. The clay had a lot of plasticity back then. They could really work it. Here's what the bottom on this looks like. This was a bit neater than the last. Nicely cut and trimmed, recessed, unglazed bottom. And again with a Chait label. This is a Kangxi period triple gourd carved Celadon. These are quite rare in the triple forms, and they often appeared in the Middle East. Here's a picture of the foot. Note again, that V is getting onto that V-shaped foot, but very tidy, very tight how the glaze stops just above the foot, and the bottom, not surprisingly, is glazed white. Here's another carved Celadon, sent to Europe, Kangxi period. Somebody made a tea caddy out of it. Could have been in India too. They did them there as well. Here's a view of the bottom. Again, the V-shaped foot, the white bottom, and you see little bits of pink there. That's probably due to the copper or something in the glaze. It turned the color. Bottoms of Celadons can change color. And there's a Mei Ping vase with a cafe au lait rim, Kangxi period. Very neat, tidy foot rim to it. Well shaped, recessed bottom. Slightly glazed. There's a nice crackle that was on this glaze, on this vase as well. And here is a good Blanc de Sheen libation cup with a dragon on the right side chasing the pearl, and some trees and bushes on the left, beautifully shaped. And there's the foot on the bottom of one of these. They typically are unglazed or partially glazed. There's no real rule on it, and often sort of just quickly trimmed. Here is what is either a Kangxi or maybe a Yongchen period Langyao dish with a white rim, and it has a lot of crackle in it, a lot of color. And on the bottoms of these, especially the Kangxi ones, you'll often see that sort of Celadon toning with red splotching through it, typical of those pieces. And there's the foot, neatly done, some turning marks evident there, well carved, good color. And notice the crackle. Here's another, the Kangxi Bowl. Notice how the iron red turns sort of green at the bottom. And this is a Langyao bowl. And when you take it and you flip it over, or you look inside, again you're seeing that same effect that we just saw a minute ago on that other plate. The Celadon, the way the copper reacts in the kiln, sometimes it turns, instead of coming out red, it comes out green. And here it is on the bottom. It's all green. It's almost like they intended it that way. The potter may have. Celadon. Foot's got a little damage, but you can still see the shape of it. And then we get into this. This is a very nice, about a 4-inch high Daosai Yongchen mark and period little table bottle. Very finely done. This is a very lovely little bottle that we had from a collection sold for the customer, and but spectacular quality. And move along. There's the bottom. Again, a very neat foot with Yongchen mark on it. Nicely done. This is only about an inch wide there, a half an inch wide. This is a rather fine 18th century Yixing pottery tea jar. It was polished so it almost looks like brass when it would sit on a shelf. It was beautiful. I actually owned this for a number of years. And there's the bottom, unpolished, with a seal mark that you couldn't read anymore. This is a tea desk glaze bowl, 18th century, very nicely done. The very pronounced crackle and color changes in the glaze formed a wonderful pattern. And there's that extremely white foot. This was also a very heavy bowl for its size, and whoever glazed it and worked it really did a neat job with it. The glaze went on very thick and formed this beautiful patterning and color, almost a brownish gold. This is a Qinlong period iron red decorated altar stick. Qinlong Emperor was actually depicted in paintings with these. And there's a picture of the foot, flat as a pancake, and the base is extremely well done on the interior. These are often given as gifts to Buddhist monks. And here you have a Yongchen to Qinlong period famille rose figure, sort of a terrace landscape with precious objects seen. Nice border. Here's the interior, and there's the underside, nicely done, slightly bluer in tone than the front. And here's a pair of Yongchen to Qinlong famille rose little jarlets, bottles. They're about 5 or 6 inches tall. Beautiful color, lavish depth of color on those. And the feet are neatly done, like the others. And you can see slight turnings there and minor imperfections in the bottoms with the glaze. Very typical. Here you have a double gourd phoenix vase, cobalt blue, later 18th century. Nice white body still on these, and rather well done. There's the foot. Sort of a rustic foot on it. Some people say these are Kangxi. I never think they are, but they're 18th century. Quite attractive. And here are a pair of Chinese export enameled cups dating from the latter part of the 1700s with monograms on them, made in huge quantities for the West. And there's a picture of the foot rim on it. Again, you have that skin tone appearing on these 18th century plates, but a plain undecorated back. This is a Celadon and white slip glaze decorated vase with the apple blossom tree on it. A lot of crackles in this. This had a hard time in the firing. You see the crackles, but I liked the vase. And the glaze top very neatly above the foot and nicely shaped and finished. It had some banging around it went through in its life though, but it's still an example to look at. There's the foot. Notice how thick that glaze is as it gets down towards that foot. It really thickened up and somehow rolled back. This is a good mid-18th century, possibly older plate with the ducks on it. On the back of it, you're going to see it has a cafe au lait ground on it. Some folks debate on these. They're Kangxi or Qinlong, but you can rest pretty assured that they're early to mid-18th century all the time. And here are a pair of Qinlong, mark and period, white offering cups. These were originally sold by C.T. Lu to a collector. We ended up with them. And there's the rain mark. There was a rain mark like this under both of them. Very nicely done. Elegant formed vessels they were. They went to the UK. And here's an excellent slab constructed 18th century tea caddy box with brass handles. Note it had a hole in the middle for an escutcheon. Never got a lock though, but they used to lock tea caddies. It was so expensive. There's the bottom Very typical, flat, unglazed, but an extremely rare box, just so you know that. And here you have an 18th century turquoise glaze jar with a little foliate rim. You can't see too much of the rim, but it's sort of flower shaped. Nice turnings. And there's the bottom with obvious turning and then radiating lines. Again, some folks are always saying these are always Kangxi, and other people say, oh no, they're 18th century. And this, late 18th to early 19th century Ghee-type shaped column vase with lion mask handles on each side. Very thickly glazed, and it's a double crackle. It's got this dense black crackle that was caused when they rubbed them down with black ink to stain them while they were cooling, and a minor crackle, sort of a goldish brown color. There's a shot of the underside of it. Note the shaped foot again, and the recessed bottom with the sort of even crackle. There's a view. This is looking at the foot from the side. A much smaller crackle than you'd see on the body. Not unusual. Here are a pair of rather big, these were about 14 inches tall, Femi-Vert foulines made in the early part of the 19th century, but very fine quality, really great quality. And here's a view of the bottom. The multiple holes, flat, unglazed, pretty typical. And these are usually quite heavy if you pick them up. You're surprised at how heavy they are, because the walls on the bases tend to be very thick, and the figures themselves are also densely potted. So if you pick them up and they're much heavier than you thought it would be, then it's probably an old one. And this is a late 18th, early 19th century sort of famille rose. It's a provincial vase. This is not something from the palace. This is just a nice decorative vase. And there's the bottom. It's unglazed, recessed. You can see turnings under there and a rounded foot. It's pretty dirty looking, actually. It could use a bath. And now you have this little jadao with salmon color and gilt decoration with a blue, robin's egg blue interior. And there's your Kuan mark on the bottom, recessed bottom with the turquoise. Nicely done little foot. Pretty typical of the period. Nice piece. You can find these out there looking around at local auctions. And they're very attractive, and they're quite popular these days in China with collectors. And here you have a very nice early 19th century blue and white bowl with a wave leaping horse beneath a zigzaggy border. And there's the bottom, the mark, the Dao Kuan mark. Nicely done. Typical foot. And remember how those marks look. They can fake them, but that's what a good one looks like. It's a lovely little bowl, and it was in a collection we got it from some time ago. There's a side view of the foot. You can see the wave pattern around the edge of the foot rim, and you notice that it looks almost out of focus. That's because the glaze is very thick there. And here you have an iron red decorated fouline teapot. I love this thing. I thought this was a great thing. I like the shape of it, and I like the way the foulines are drawn with the older and younger fouline. There's a view of the bottom. And again, the glaze very tidily ended right at the foot, and the foot was slightly canted inwards. And here's a very nice big Blanc de Sheen figure of a Kuan Yin seated on a fouline. Early 19th century example. There's the underside to it. Look up inside, you often see those cracks and things inside, but they don't show through, fortunately. And a nicely finished flat bottom, trimmed. Then you have this sort of domed teapot with familial rose with a Mandarin woman on it, and very openly spaced, nicely painted actually. This was done in the 1800s. And there she is on the lid. Notice the foot recessed. There's some kiln grit even on this, and the foot is just sort of rounded. All right, now we have this blue and white Kansu period Lotus dish with vines, typical. And there's a view of the bottom. There's the rain mark. This is a period dish. It's not an imperial dish, but it is a Marcan period dish. There is a difference. There's a very attractive familial Millefiori gilt ground box. Lots of flowers on this, mid-19th century. Here's a view of the bottom. Again, you have one of these, they added a chin-lung mark to it. It's not chin-lung, but it's a very fine box, quite good quality. And this was big, this was about 13 inches wide. And here you have, we're heading towards the end here, a nice big pair of very late 19th century blue enamel vases with bats. And the underside, you notice the paste is getting, suddenly it's kind of rough. And a Kangxi mark, which is not Kangxi, but they would put them on there, as everyone knows. And then you have this large 24, 25 inch tall vase, as I recall, Famille Rose, Mandarin with warrior scenes on it, and those cute blue and pink Fu lions on the neck. And made about 1840, 1830. There's the underside of it, the rounded foot, recessed, minor imperfections in the paste there. Now this is not a Kangxi vase, though it was done like a Kangxi vase, and this was typical of production of the late 19th century. Be careful out there with these. People often think they are, but when you look at the foot, you know immediately that is not a Kangxi foot. Alright, so you could tell by the decoration if you look at a lot of these, but in particular the foot. Here's Kong, Underglaze blue Kong vase. Very nicely done, almost an iridescent quality to this vase. And the underside, you can see there were 4 little spurs on the outer corners, used to support it a bit during the firing, probably to keep the sides straight from sagging. And a nicely done, neat foot. And the Famille Noire Kangxi style vase with the bird and the aubergine trees. This is a late 19th century vase, though. There's a view of the bottom. Foot was quite well done on it, but not quite what you'd expect to see. It has a light blue Ming mark on it, which definitely wouldn't be that color blue if it was Kangxi. And you have this, the salmon colored or orange ground enamel jar with underglaze blue, sort of cut away in relief around the figure. And there's a foot on it. This is a late 19th century jar, but pretty, very pretty. And the double rings, okay, so a double ring and no mark. And here are a pair of late 19th century Fu lions, done with Sankai or Famille. It's somewhat crude. They'd made lots of these. They turn up everywhere. They're always late 19th, early 20th century. Some are marked China, some aren't. There's the underside of it. And this was a great vase. This is a beautiful tea dust glaze sort of bottle vase. This is the color that it was, sort of a goldish green, and beautifully done. And there's the foot on that, how it looks when the glaze meets up with the foot rim. It's flattened nicely, very tidily done vase, thick glaze. This was a heavy vase too. And there's the mark. It's carved into cut into the bottom or pressed into the bottom, and they would set away this nice light yellowish background to contrast it for reading. Here is another Guangsu marked period Kong, this time, in very soft blue, beautiful soft blue with a very dense glaze, and the foot on this very nicely done with a good deep cobalt blue mark applied. This was found in the attic of a house in southern New Hampshire. Somebody brought it to me. It's quite a thing. And there's the foot. Really well done, and nice white paste on these finer pieces in the late 19th century, early 20th. They look like that. And here you have the last. It's a pair of Republican Millefiori vases with masks done in the early 20th century. Very nice, and nice shape to them, and blue enameling. And here's the bottom. It's flat, unglazed, fairly wide, with a recessed glazed center and a rain mark that got drilled when these were made into lamps. And I think that about does it. And if you learned anything here, you learned perhaps that there's a lot of variety in the way these porcelains have been made over the years. And I hope that it helps you while you're out there in the field trying to find things and learn about them and visiting museums, and that it aids you in being able to date things accurately, which is very important. And have a great time out there, and if you ever have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. And you have a very good week. Thanks so much for visiting. And visit our website, bidamount.com. You can get the newsletter and stay in touch. And we'll put more things up there as time goes along. Thank you.